The hall was already restless, murmurs bouncing off the high ceilings, anticipation sparking like static in the air. Then, in a sudden burst, Candace Owens' voice tore through the noise. She was mid-sentence, her words spilling out like bullets, each syllable sharper than the last. Her hand shot forward, fingers stabbing the air as though sheer volume and fury could pierce through her opponent. Veins lined her neck, her tone climbing into something less like debate and more like a storm, desperate to swallow the stage whole. Gasps rippled through the audience, camera flashes punctuating the tension. Each white burst freezing her in unflattering frames of rage. But then came the contrast, so sharp it felt scripted, so cinematic it could have been a scene from a film. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't frown, didn't break her posture, didn't rise to meet fire with fire. She sat still, hands folded neatly before her eyes locked on Owens with a steadiness that unnerved the room. The louder Owens grew, the quieter Crockett. Seemed as if calm itself was a kind of weapon. It was the posture of someone who knew that composure could be louder than shouting, that restraint could be its own thunder. The audience shifted uneasily. Some leaned forward, waiting for Crockett to snap back, to meet rage with rage. Others looked on in awe, realizing they were watching something rare, the slow unraveling of anger when it crashes against the unshakable wall of dignity. Silence became heavier than Owens' words, silence that demanded the room's attention. And then, like a voiceover, narrating the moment. The truth became undeniable, in a moment that left the entire hall stunned. One voice thundered with rage, while another replied with quiet strength that shook the internet. Every camera in the room was trained on Crockett. Every spectator holding their breath. For all the noise Owens had conjured, it was Crockett's calm that made the hall feel suspended. In time, the question wasn't if she would answer, but how. What words could possibly match this storm without shouting back? No one expected what came next. But what Crockett said next would flip the script and silence the chaos in a single breath. To understand why this clash mattered, you have to step back and see the backdrop. America in this moment was already a nation fraying at the seams, its politics poisoned with division. Every conversation seeming to split into shouting matches before a sentence could be finished. Social media had turned disagreement into spectacle, headlines into weapons, and personalities into lightning rods. Against that backdrop, the stage that night wasn't just another platform, it was a battlefield, symbolic of something larger than two women trading words. It was the story of a country deciding whether it would reward chaos or respect dignity. Candace Owens entered that arena with her reputation intact, a right-wing firebrand. The kind of figure who thrived on confrontation. Her audience adored her because she was loud, unfiltered, and relentless. She had built her brand on transforming debates into showdowns, her voice rising until her opponent looked small in comparison. To her supporters, this was strength. To her critics, it was theater masquerading as truth. Either way, her presence guaranteed fireworks, and that night, she came ready to ignite them. But sitting across from her was someone different. Jasmine Crockett didn't need theatrics. She didn't need to shout to be heard. A rising congresswoman. With a sharp legal mind and a reputation for grit, Crockett represented a different kind of power, the kind that comes from intellect sharpened in courtrooms and battles for justice. The kind that grows stronger the more it is tested. She was not there to be a prop in Owens' performance. She was there as herself, as the voice of communities too often drowned out. As proof that dignity can wear armor stronger than volume. That's what made the moment so electric. It wasn't simply one personality versus another. It was the embodiment of a larger American tension. Owens' style of politics, angry, performative, brash against, Crockett's measured, rooted in service, disciplined, rage versus reason, noise versus clarity. It was a confrontation so symbolic it almost felt destined. The audience could sense it even before the first words were exchanged. Could hear it in the whispers, see it in the anticipation on faces lit by stage lights. This wasn't going to be a polite panel. This was going to be a clash of philosophies. The kind of moment where one side would reveal its fragility under the weight of the other. And that is why it mattered. Because in an America where shouting had become the default setting, where the loudest often won airtime but not truth, the contrast was stark. Owens represented the temptation of chaos, the quick hit of anger, the seduction of volume. Crockett represented the discipline of dignity, the strength it takes to hold composure in the face of attack, which would prevail in front of the cameras. Which would America choose to amplify? Most who tuned in thought they knew the answer. They expected a predictable spectacle, another night of viral clips that faded within hours. Viewers who tuned in thought they were about to watch a routine panel. Instead, they witnessed history. Because what unfolded on that stage didn't just stay there. It cracked open the story of who truly holds power in America, the one who screams the loudest, the one who refuses to be shaken. Candace Owens did not appear out of nowhere. She was not an overnight sensation, though the speed of her rise sometimes made it feel that way. She built herself as a brand first, a persona before a politician. A provocateur who knew that in an age of hashtags and 20-second clips, volume often traveled farther than substance. She styled herself as a fearless truth-teller, someone unafraid to challenge the so-called mainstream narrative. For her followers, this was refreshing. For her critics, it was exhausting theater. Either way, Owens mastered the art of commanding attention, and in politics, attention is currency. Her journey was paved with outrage. She discovered early that indignation could be repackaged as courage, that the louder she sounded, the more her base applauded. She didn't just walk into debates. She stormed into them, her sentences dripping with condescension, her tone designed to corner her opponents into flustered silence. She knew the optics of confrontation, knew that if she spoke faster, louder, and more aggressively, she could dominate a stage even without dominating the argument. That became her signature manufactured intimidation, masquerading as strength, but beneath the carefully honed persona was a striking contradiction. Owens had built her name railing against identity politics, scorning those who spoke about race, gender, or ancestry as central to political discourse. She mocked, derided, and dismissed it as weakness. And yet, she simultaneously monetized her own identity, wielding it as proof that her views were above criticism. A black woman denouncing systemic racism, a millennial scorning progressives, she sold herself as living evidence that the conservative machine was inclusive. Her very presence became a prop in the culture wars she claimed to despise. That contradiction followed her everywhere. She demanded respect while sneering at others, called for civility while shouting down her critics, preached accountability while excusing allies who trafficked in worse. It was arrogance wrapped in self-assuredness, entitlement disguised as confidence. Her admirers saw her as untouchable. Her detractors saw someone brittle, hiding fragility behind bluster, and slowly cracks began to show. Not everyone was cowed by her volume. Some audiences started to notice that when the shouting stopped, the substance was thin. That her signature tactic of smirking through an opponent's rebuttal did not erase their points. That her condescension was not confidence, but a mask. These were whispers at first, drowned out by the cheers of her loyal followers. But every mask slips eventually, and every persona meets its test. Owens herself seemed to sense this. The higher she climbed, the sharper her tone became. Each debate had to be bigger, each confrontation more explosive, each outburst louder than the last. She had locked herself into a cycle. The louder she yelled, the more applause she got, but the less room she left for humility, for nuance, for growth. The brand she had built became a cage, demanding performance at all costs. And yet, for all her bravado, the inevitability loomed. Someone would come along who didn't flinch, who didn't rise to her bait, who wouldn't give her the satisfaction of an emotional counterpunch. Someone whose calm would feel like a mirror held up to her rage, forcing audiences to question what true strength looked like. Owens could silence crowds, but what happens when the crowd doesn't laugh along? She could overwhelm opponents, but what happens when the opponent doesn't budge? She could scream her truth, But what happens when the silence on the other side feels louder? These were the questions lurking beneath the surface of her carefully managed image. Questions that her team, her fans, and even she herself pushed aside. Because as long as the spotlight followed her, as long as the camera rewarded the storm, there was no need to imagine a world where that storm lost its power. But that night, on that stage, Owens faced a test unlike any she had encountered. She unleashed her trademark fury, raising her voice until it echoed off the walls, convinced that once again her opponent would crumble. Only this time, the storm did not sweep the stage. This time, the storm revealed its limits.